Hello, hello. Happy day or evening to you, depending on when you're watching. I am glad you're here. Well, we've been talking about relationships, God's design for relationships, and we've seen that it's really nothing like what the world offers or what the world says it should be. It's not the extremes. We're not to be adversaries or competing with men, and we're not to be subjugated to men either. We're to be complementing and cooperating together. And we look specifically quite a bit at the marriage relationship. But remember, this is not just within marriage. This is all women and all men are to be partnering together to accomplish God's purposes in our world. Excuse me. Well, today, we are moving into a different relationship. We are going to look specifically at the mother-son relationship. Now, if you don't have a son, you might be married to a son. Or if you have a father or a brother or a coworker or a neighbor who is male, you need to realize that he has been influenced by his mom. So I challenge you today as we talk through these concepts that you really see how this can apply to you, your life, and the men who are in your life, or the men who might be in your life someday as a husband, as a son, or as a son-in-law. So think on those things. You know, the mother-son relationship is a really special one. Take a look at this.
Everything about our relationship is perfect, except for one thing, his mom.
We've talked about marriage and things, and that's...
Gotta put a ring on it.
Shakib is my soulmate, but his whole life revolves around his mother.
I don't see anything wrong about it.
People don't understand my mom and I's relationship.
Jason, it's mommy!
Hey!
Jason is a mama's boy. They go on dates.
She'll sit there and cuddle with him.
Yeah, make sure you get the middle back too, Mom.
I feel like I'm dating Matt and his mom. There are no boundaries. We don't have that intimacy anymore.
That's certainly spicy.
Yeah?
I mean, I'm not a therapist or a psychologist, but what is that?
In life, there's a hierarchy, and I'm right up top.
Feels like it's a competition. This girl that I love is pulling me one way, you calling me on the other hand, pulling me this way.
Well, it is a competition.
Who do you love the most, Emily or me?
I feel like Jason just is totally ignoring me, basically every time we're together now. My relationship with my son is very strained. Justina has a lot to do with that.
His mom has to like me before we get engaged because she is gonna make the final call.
And that's a horrible feeling to have. This is your life.
You really need to take my son from me. It's always just been me and Michael. You know, I'm his mom, like I'm supposed to protect him.
Hey,
but
Mom,
it's just so hard, honey.
Mom.
You're my only one.
Wow. Just wow. I mean, at first it's kind of funny and then it's super sad, right? So that's not what we want. And we today want to look at how we can contribute in a positive way to the sons in our lives. So what we want to do is focus today on avoiding the mother wound. Yes, that's a thing. And we want to avoid the mother wound. So when men talk about how things affect them in the biblical manhood, authentic manhood study, they call them wounds. And there's a father wound and a mother wound. And just so you know, the father wound is way worse, but there is a mother wound. So we're going to talk about it. Today we're going to talk about what it is, define it, and then why it happens, and then look at how we can avoid it. So that's our goal for today. So let's start with defining the mother wound, looking at what it is. I want to read to you from a study done by Prentice Tipton. This was a study called The Crisis in Black Manhood. So it was done specifically on Black men, but we can apply it to all men because it's relevant. This is what he says, what he found. And listen, it's kind of a long quote, but it really sets sets the stage for the mother wound. He says, when mothers lead the family because the fathers fail to lead, either by absenting themselves from the home or by taking a passive role, boys are deprived of the most important natural model of manliness. Growing up mainly under the supervision of women, many experience insecurity over their identity as men. One tendency for boys growing up in such circumstances is to rebel against women who are authorities over them and become socially disruptive, irresponsible in family and work commitments, overly assertive about their manly prowess, especially in sexual areas, or leading lives characterized by violence and crime, alcoholism, and other addictions. Another tendency is for young men to identify with the adult women who are authorities in their lives and learn to behave or react in ways that are more appropriate to women than to men. To the extent that young males take either option, they do not learn the discipline, the responsibility, and the character involved in being a man. Super interesting. So, do you remember in lesson 8 when we talked about man's or male depravity, that they kind of have a tendency toward one or two different ways? This is saying that as women, we can, if we're not careful, aid in pushing them toward their natural sin tendencies. So we want to be careful, and that's what we call the mother wound. So the mother wound really has two expressions, and that's what he just described. So we're going to look at those a little more closely. The first expression is that sons become overly passive or feminized in regard to women. Overly passive or feminized. In the man's video, they call it being soft, right? This is a man who has a hard time making decisions or taking risks. It looks like he's sensitive, but in actuality, he's passive. Remember, we saw this in Genesis 3. Adam, the first man, was passive. He knew what he was supposed to do in not eating the fruit, and yet he failed to do it. He didn't tell Eve, let's not do this. It's not a good idea. Then in lesson 9, when we looked at nurturing for control, we saw King Ahab. Do you remember him? He was a passive, feminized man. At one point, there was a vineyard that he wanted, and the owner of the vineyard wouldn't sell it to him. And it literally says he became sullen and angry, and he lays down on his bed, sulking and won't eat. He's pouting like a young girl. He's pouting. And of course, his wife, Jezebel, comes in and takes care of everything and solves everything. But what we see when we look at his life, and there's other examples, we really see him as a classic feminized man. Let me explain what I mean by that. This is a guy who was overtly bonded to his mother, and he has more of a female operating system. Now, I'm not talking about his outward appearance or characteristics. I'm talking about how he feels and thinks. I want to read to you, remember Robert Lewis, who helped to create this course? He writes about this, and he summarizes what sociologist Marianne Levy says and finds about this phenomenon. It's really interesting. And he says it's written over and over again about when there's an abundance of female mentors and there's little to no interaction with men, there's this historical peculiarity unlike anything we've ever seen in America that happens. It's unlike anything we've ever seen in history, in Western or world civilization. That's the world America's created. It's the new sociological melting point. And Levy says the result of what we're getting today is what he calls the feminized man. The feminized man is not the effeminate man. He's not the man who has female characteristics or looks outwardly like a female, like the way he holds his hand or that sort of a thing. There are men like that, but they're very masculine in their emotions and their psyche. So a man that has more effeminate characteristics, but he still has a male operating system. We're talking about a man who has learned to act and think and hear more like a woman. So he tends to wait and pause and let other people make decisions for him. He is unwilling to take risks. He places a really high emphasis on his emotions and feelings. He's indecisive. When women balk or bark, it's not that he's being insensitive, but the feminized man is paralyzed by that. He's unable to enter into the chaos and be decisive. So he freezes and waits for direction. That's what he's calling a feminized man. So it's a man who is really incapacitated at times by his emotions and his feelings because he's overly identified with women, particularly his mom. And a man like this ends up marrying a mother wife. And this might seem okay for a moment, but it gets really old really fast to the wife because she really expected to marry a man, not a boy. And she wants a partner, not a child, right? So very quickly, the woman loses respect for her husband. And remember, we talked about the fact that a husband or a man's core need is respect. So for a man not to get this, it's damaging. But for this type of man, the feminized man, not to get respect, it's detrimental. So you can see again how we've got this cycle taking place where he won't stand up and she can't give respect. So let me just tell you, a side note, if already you're like, oh wow, I'm married to that, or you see that in your life, let me encourage you that even though it seems incredibly almost impossible, we're still called to respect our husbands unconditionally. And I encourage you to pray about and lean into respecting him, respecting the role God has given him, respecting him, believing he can become the man God has called him to be. Okay, side note. That's one expression, right? The effeminate or the feminized man. The other expression is this: sons become overly dominant or hostile in regard to women. So one's the passive, feminized man, and one is a dominant, hostile man. Once again, we saw this kind of set up in Genesis 3 when God said, wives will want to control their husbands and husbands will rule over them, right? And that's not a benevolent rule or leadership. It's a harsh one. And we see that this guy, because of his over-identifying with his mom, he has a wound there. And so he now has a really hard time with strong women, because he sees strong women as a threat to his independence. So he has a hard time engaging to be intimate, like having intimate relationships, because he fears that he will be suffocated, that his independence will be taken away. So on a side note, if you're like, oh, that's me, I'm in that situation, let me encourage you that it's important still to express respect. And also, it's a respect for his manhood, and express the fact that you have no desire to compete or to dominate him, but you want to cooperate with him. And that's the goal there. So we see these two expressions, right? So now let me give you a definition of womanhood. Not a definition of womanhood, a definition of the mother wound. Here it is. The mother wound is an unhealthy emotional relationship with mom that causes a son to either be threatened by the influence of women later on in his life, or to over-identify and become submissive to the influence of women. So let's talk about some of the characteristics of this wound. First of all, it's not blatant, but subtle. This wound is subtle. The father wound is more like a gash. This is more like a razor cut. Like you can't really see it, but you see the blood. You know it's there. Second, it's not a wound of abuse or neglect or absenteeism, but it's a wound that looks like love and care. It looks like love and care because it's not from inattention, it's from over attention. Let me say that again. The mother wound is not from inattention, but from over attention. See, the father wound is from inattention, but the mother wound is from too much attention. It looks like love, but feels like control. On the appearance, it looks like love, but from the son's perspective, it feels like control. Like, mom takes care of everything. Mom loves me. She knows what's best, but I better not cross her. I better do it her way. Another characteristic is that it has a power that can shape and or warp the masculine psyche. It's pretty powerful. So yeah, moms have a powerful role in shaping their sons into men. And you see, boys need to break from their moms as they grow into becoming men. They need to make a break. And as moms, we need to allow that and not discourage it. Otherwise, our sons end up on a TLC reality show called I Love a Mama's Boy, like we saw earlier. So why? That's the definition. Now why? Why does this happen? Why does the mother wound happen? Well, you'll be happy to know that it begins with the father wound. The mother wound begins with an absent or distant father or an absence of men in general. So it starts when there is no male influence, not from a dad, not from anyone else. And then, because of things that we as women, as mothers can do, we can make it worse. And here is how we perpetuate it, or how women could perpetuate it. Let's go through these things. And let's remember that we all have blind spots. So as we look at these, it's really good to assume I might have a tendency toward one or more of these, and we want to be aware of that. Here's the first one. It's perpetuated by the ignorant mom. Ignorant moms. Now, I don't mean stupid or dumb mom. I mean unaware. Unaware mom. She's unaware and doesn't understand that her son needs to make an emotional break from her at some point, from adolescence on into young manhood. He needs to make a break from her. She doesn't understand that mothering a 7-year-old boy is extremely different than mothering a 17-year-old boy or a 27-year-old boy, right? So she needs to make, this is the mom. She's ignorant. The second mom is the needy or hurting mom. The needing and hurting moms. These are the moms that are alone. Now, they may not be physically alone, but emotionally they're alone. And so they draft their son in to her own emotional state, right? She is guilty of over-connecting on an emotional level with her son. She needs him. She shares her life with him and listens to his life, and she's connected to him emotionally in a huge way. And as he grows, he carries the responsibility of his mom's emotional health on his shoulders. Now, fast forward this, and what do you think happens when that guy gets married? His wife becomes a threat. His wife becomes the other woman, because now he's responsible on some level for two women's emotional well-being. You can see how this might lead to some manipulation and passive-aggressive behavior, so we need to be careful about that. The other type of mom that perpetuates this is the unwilling to release mom. The moms who just can't let go. Usually this is a mom who is pretty dominant, pretty controlling personality. She runs the world, and her son's in the world, so she runs her son. And she thinks ahead. She plans. She knows what's best. She's often right, you know? She knows what's best for him. And she has a hard time letting go because she never stopped knowing what was best for him. She's the mom that is still controlling long after he's gone, saying things like, "You will be coming for Christmas, right?" Or, "Dad and I will see you on your birthday," right? This is the mom who has a hard time letting go. And then finally, the moms who we call fill in the gaps moms, fill in the gap moms. This is the single mom, and she recognizes that there is no male influence in her son's life, and he needs that. So she tries to do both. She tries to be both mom and dad to her son. So you might even see her trying to have some kind of masculine characteristics out on the football field, yelling at the coaches, yelling at, the refs or whatever. And she's kind of trying to do both. The problem is, in trying to do both, she is doing neither very well. Because remember, sons need the contrast. A son needs to be able to look at what he isn't when he looks at his female mom. So for those type of moms, be a mom and then pray about and go after other male influences that can be in your son's life, because it is important. You're right, but one mom can't be both. Okay. Now let me take a little time out here, a little breather, because some of you are feeling a little defeated, like, well, I screwed my son up, or I'm currently screwing my son up, or whatever. And I want to just, as we've said in the past, remind you that every adult is responsible for their own choices. Every adult in your life is responsible for their own choices. And let me also remind you that we have to trust in God's big picture and the sovereignty and the timetable of God. Let me also remind you that you can't change the past. You can't. But if you allow shame about the past to render you hopeless and helpless and worthless, you need to know that's from Satan. And that's a lie. That's not from God. If there's something in our life based on this week or previous weeks that you realize, I need to go have a conversation with someone. I need to ask for forgiveness for this. Whatever it is, if you need to do something, do it. And then we leave the past in the past. Accept God's forgiveness and we move on. We can't change the past, but we can change how we relate to sons right now. Right now. Whether you have a son that's 5 or 35. We can change how, and by the way, you can change how you relate to your son's wife right now as well. So, we see the mother wound. We see the result or why that happens and that we don't want that to happen. So now let's talk about how can we help our sons make the break? How can they make a break in a healthy, positive, productive way as they move toward manhood? Now, we're going to talk about some tips in this area. But before I do, I want to tell you, these tips are not a formula for success. Because number one, there's no formula for success. I wish there was. We'd all pay a whole lot for it, but there's not. There's no formula for success. Number two, your son, if you have a son, is just like everyone else in the world, and he is independent and will make his own choices, and no one can make him do the right thing. We just can't do that. And number three, even if you were the perfect mother, well, actually, number three is you can't be the perfect mother. So he's going to make his own choices, whether you are amazing or not. And you might be amazing, but you're not perfect. None of us are. We're just not. And that's okay. That's why we need Jesus. We need him. We need the Holy Spirit to convict us of things we've done wrong, to forgive us, and to help us move forward in doing things that are honoring and productive. We need the Holy Spirit. We need Jesus. And in truth, to be the best mother you can be, it starts with your relationship with Christ. So work on that relationship, and out of that, out of that comes your mothering or being a wife or being a good friend or coworker. That's where it starts. With that in mind, I do have some tips for you to consider. So these are tips to mothering toward manhood. You're mothering your son toward manhood. Number 1, be aware of your feminine blind spots and listen to masculine input. We've said it a million times. Men and women are different. We're different. We operate differently, and that's by design. And if you think you fully understand men, you're wrong. You don't. We don't fully get it. We have blind spots as females, and we need masculine input. My mom grew up with 4 sisters, no brothers. So when she had my 2 brothers, she had 2 sons, she was on a steep learning curve. And I remember hearing my dad say often, that's just what boys do. That's just what boys do. But y'all, when my middle brother started playing football, I wasn't sure if my mom was going to survive. And they would sit in the stands, and if ever my brother was down on the play, like fallen down, if he stayed down longer than 2 seconds, she kind of started raising up in her seat. And if he was down longer than about 5 seconds, she was moving upward and about to charge the field, except my dad was beside her and would throw what we used to call the invisible seatbelt in the car. He would seatbelt her to the bench and make sure she stayed seated, because he knew no high school boy needed his mama to run out on the field and rescue him. The problem is, that's what felt right to her. That's what felt natural for her, to go and rescue her baby. And she needed the influence of her husband, my dad, to say, no, you don't. Have a seat. It's going to be okay. We need that. We all have blind spots. Okay, number 2, be a woman and expect your son to treat you like one. Expect him to treat you like a woman. Remember, sons need to see this is what a woman is and this is what a woman isn't. They need to watch and learn how to respect women and how not to take advantage. They need to learn that men protect and honor and respect the women in their lives. They don't take advantage of them. High school and middle school boys need to know that they're growing into be men. They don't need to be hanging on mom, saying I'm bored or whatever. They need to be showing respect and taking some responsibility. They need to learn how to treat you. That's their primary way of learning how to treat women. We cannot expect our sons to treat us disrespectfully and then magically learn how to be respectful of women. It starts at home. We have to expect that from our sons. Number 3, expect him to do the right thing, even if it's scary or hard. Even if it's scary or hard. If guys need to, in the manhood course, they talk about doing things courageously. And they have to learn that courage. If when something is scary or hard, it's kind of a get out of jail free card, they'll play it every single time. We need to encourage them that even if it's scary, even if it's hard, you can have courage and do it. So even if your little guy is super shy, he needs to be courageous. The right thing to do is still say hello to the person who addressed him. Your sons need to have courage and go talk to the teacher about their grade. Go talk to the coach. They don't need mama coming to the rescue, making the call or having the meetings. They need to learn, yes, it's hard and scary, but you can do hard and scary things. More than you rescuing them, they need to know you have confidence and believe in them to do the right thing. Number 4, expect him to be responsible and to shoulder his responsibilities. Expect it. Be shocked if he doesn't take care of business. Be just surprised that he's not doing the things that you know he is fully capable of doing. In the same way we talk about putting responsibility on our husbands, we can do that with our sons. We can say, here's the situation. What do you want to do about it? How do you think you should handle this? And let them figure it out. Let them think about it. And we definitely should not be doing things for sons that they can do by themselves. Now, confession time. You guys know I am not the expert. I am learning all of this right alongside you. So here's my confession. Up until last week, my boys are in middle school, both of them, and up until last week, I was still making their lunches every single morning. So last week, I was out of town staying with a friend for a funeral. So I was there over the week, and her kids got up while I was there, and all 4 of them made their own lunches. And I said, wow, do they always make their own lunches, or is that just because I'm here in the funeral? She's like, no, they do it they've done it all year. So you better believe I came home and said, all right, boys, starting Monday, you're making your own lunches. I'm done. I'm not doing it anymore. And I was prepared for a fight. I was prepared for whining and why, and there's not enough time. And it was so interesting. I told them I'm not doing it anymore. And they said, why? And I said, based on what I've been studying to teach you guys, I said, because I think I've been babying you too much. And they both thought about that and said, okay. And that was it. It was like I said, it's time to man up a little bit. And they took the challenge. So they don't know it, but more is coming. But we don't need to be doing things for our sons that they can do on their own. What they need more from us, and often we do this. I mean, I make their lunches because, well, it's control. I can control what they eat, and I can control what time they get out the door. So I'm having to let go of that. But what our sons need more than us taking control is they need to look in our eyes and see a mom who believes in them, believes they can handle it. I believe in you. Do it. They need to shoulder their responsibility. Okay, and number 5, encourage man time between him and his dad or male mentors. Encourage it. I mean, sometimes we get a little feeling like we're left out. Our feelings hurt because we want to be included. But you guys, for boys to become men, they have to be around men. And they do have to make a break from their mom. It's important. Boys learn to be men by being around men. So encourage that. And number 6, commit now to treat his wife with respect. Commit now. If your son's not married yet, commit now. If your son is married, commit now. If you haven't been doing a good job of this, commit now. When we aren't respectful and honoring to our son's wife, it damages our relationship with our son, and it does harm to their marriage. And that's not what we want. And ladies, honestly, if we put a son in a position of choosing between his wife and his mom, he should choose his wife every time. We need to show respect, commit to showing respect to our sons' wives. Okay, so as we look at all this, I want to close by taking a close look at the most perfect son and his relationship with his mom. I want to look at the life of Jesus because he loved his mom. And we get to see several interactions with the two of them. He loved her, he respected her, he provided and took care of her, but he also made a very clear break from her. So let's look at the life of Jesus and his relationship with his mother Mary. Now think for a second about Mary. She was a strong woman. When she was just a young teenage girl, an angel visited her, right? And says, you're going to have a baby and you're not married. So how do you feel about that? And she said, I'll do it. Even considering all the social ramifications that were going to come with that. Then, when she's 9 months pregnant, she travels something like 90 miles from Nazareth to Bethlehem on a donkey or walking, either way. She was a strong woman. And then a little later, she and Joseph, because of persecution, had to move their whole family cross-culturally to Egypt. And at the end of his life, Mary was there at the foot of the cross. She was a strong woman. And she had an interesting relationship with Jesus. So let's look at a few examples here. I want to start in Luke chapter 2. In Luke chapter 2, when they go to a feast. This is Jesus is just a boy here. So Luke chapter 2, starting in verse 41, it says, every year his parents, meaning Jesus, went to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. When he was 12 years old, they went up to the feast according to the custom. After the feast was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed behind in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it, thinking he was in their company. Excuse me. They traveled for a day. Then they began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they didn't find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. After 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Everyone was amazed. Everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. So think for a minute. They're traveling home, and it's a big group. So they just assume he's up with his cousin somewhere. They travel all day long, get to, wherever they're making camp for the night, and they can't find him. So then they have to travel a whole nother day back. It says after 3 days they find him. Can you imagine how scared she was? Can you imagine how upset she is? I mean, the emotions are high, right? And then she finds him sitting in the temple, chatting it up with all the scholars and the people there. And listen to what she says. She totally personalizes it. She says, "Son, why have you treated us like this?" Now, it's funny, if Joseph were to say something, he probably would have said, "Son, if you're going to change your plans, you need to tell someone." But Mary personalizes it and says, "Why have you done this to us?" And then she says, "Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you." Kind of like we totally do that, like assume that our feelings are everybody else's feelings. She's like, "We are nervous wrecks, have been trying to look for you and find you." And then Jesus, very calmly, as a 12-year-old, you hear him making a break from his mom. He says, "Why were you searching for me? Didn't you know I had to be in my Father's house?" You hear him say, and he's respectful, but he says, "Mom, I have a calling on my life, and it's much bigger than revolving around you and your agenda. I've got something big to do." And it says here that Mary treasures these things or ponders these things in her heart. She doesn't fully get it, but she begins to learn. Okay, the next one is at the wedding feast. Remember the wedding where Jesus turns the water into wine? Look closely at this relationship. This is in John chapter 2, starting in verse 1. It says, on the third day, a wedding took place in Cana in Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." Now, here's what's funny about this. She knows Jesus is special, right? I mean, like an angel came to her and said, "You're going to be pregnant." And there was the whole like immaculate conception thing. She knew he was special. She probably was also, like most of us, kind of a fixer. So here's a problem, and I've got the solution. So she goes to Jesus and says, "Hey, we're out of wine." And Jesus' response to her, once again, is respectful, but making a break. He says, "Dear woman," and that's a term of endearment. We're going to hear that in the next few stories. "Dear woman, why do you involve me?" He replied, "My time has not yet come." He's saying, Mom, this isn't just about you and what you want. I'm on God's agenda. I'm on God's timetable, and I'm listening to him. Now, he does go ahead and solve this problem, but he makes it really clear, I'm not just here to serve you, Mom. Okay, then there's another one, and this is when Jesus is in ministry. This is from Matthew chapter 12. Matthew's chapter 12, starting in verse 46. Visualize this one. While Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers stood outside wanting to speak to him. Someone told him, "Your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you." Jesus replied, "Who is my mother? Who are my brothers?" Pointing to his disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother." Now, I don't know about you. When I first heard this story, I thought, well, gosh, Jesus, a little harsh, don't you think? I mean, it's your mom. But okay, imagine if you were here at Hill Country Bible Church on a Sunday morning when our pastor, Pastor Tim Hawks, is speaking to thousands, I don't know how many people are there on Sunday plus online, and he's just speaking, preaching. And an usher walks up on stage and kind of whispers in his ear, but we can hear because a mic picks it up and says, "Sir, your mom's in the lobby and she just needs to visit with you." Can you imagine? Mary's completely interrupting his sermon to this crowd. And again, Jesus is saying to her, "Look, I love you, but I have got a mission here. I have responsibilities that go way beyond pleasing you, Mom. I'm answering to God, and I've got this big job to do." And we see she accepts it. And we know they still have a good relationship because she is still there. They're together at the end of Jesus' life. Let me show you this very last vignette. And this is at the cross. So let's go back to John. This is John 19, starting in verse 16. Finally, Pilate handed him over to be crucified. So the soldiers took charge of Jesus, carrying his own cross. He went out to the place of the skull, which in Aramaic is called Golgotha. Here they crucified him, and with him 2 others, one on each side, and Jesus in the middle. And then down in verse 25, it says, "Near the cross of Jesus stood his mother, his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, 'Dear woman, here is your son.' And to the disciple, 'Here is your mother.' And from that time on, this disciple took her into his home." At a time when we would most understand for a son to cry out for his mom, "I need you. Help. I can't take this." He actually, on that cross, in all his masculinity, looks down at her and provides for her, provides protection for her. He looks to her and says, "Here's your son." And he looks to John and says, "Here's your mother." He makes sure she is taken care of after he's gone. That is a man. So see, Mary lost a boy's son, but she gained a man's son. And isn't that what we want? I want to show you, I want you to just kind of get to experience this relationship. So take a look at this. So here's the goal. We lose or let go of a son who's dependent on us, but we gain a man who's dependent on God. Isn't that what we want? That's what we want. That's what we want for our sons. That's what we want for every man in our lives. You guys, it's hard. And it's impossible without God. So let me pray. God, we love you. I thank you for the example of Mary and Jesus, that Mary was not perfect, but there was still a relationship there. God, we're not perfect. Help us. Forgive us for the things we've messed up on. Help us to move forward and to encourage sons that are in our lives or that will be in our lives one day. Help us to encourage other women that have sons, knowing that it's right for them to make an emotional break from their mom. And we lose a boy son, but we gain a man son, a hero, someone who's dependent on you. That's what we want. We can't do it without you. Please help us. Holy Spirit, do it through us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Bye, guys. See you next week.